I'm a high school dropout, and honestly, I hid that for years just because of my own insecurities and trying to prove who I was, and felt like that was something that, was a barrier of respect or prestige or success, all those things that the way the world judges us.
In the Bible, God is so kind. And remember, conscious investor, if you haven't read your Bible, I always say, and you've heard me say this before, everyone's belief is open to them, but a lot of times God gets gossiped about and spoken about, and maybe you haven't actually gotten to know God on your own. So in my pursuit of saying, like, who are you, God? How do I get to know you and who you say you are, not who other people say you are? Welcome back, or welcome to the Conscious Investor podcast. I am so glad you are here. Here on the Conscious Investor, we are talking about not just investing our financial wealth and growing our financial wealth, but we're talking about investing in a holistic way. What does that look like with our health, our mindset, and our wealth? And today I'm joined by a really good friend and just someone that really helps, is like one of those guiding lights in life that you are going to absolutely love. My friend Shawn is actually a high school dropout. And I know you've probably heard a lot of those stories where, you're a high school dropout and you found wonderful success in life and in your wealth and in business and such. And so today we're going to talk about, what does it look like to transition your identity from high school dropout to business owner to, I am a wealthy person, and what does that look like? And how do I carry and conduct myself in the world? And what does that look like? Because spoiler, people who are genuinely wealthy are the best people, and they're not greedy, which is what I've learned in all of life. I do want to invite you to do two things, Conscious Investor. One, Shawn and his wife, Corey, they have recently launched a podcast channel, and it's really fantastic. They're natural conversations with them, and it's called Conversations Left Behind. So I highly recommend that you head on over to Conversations Left Behind on YouTube and subscribe to subscribe, all the things, all the bells and whistles. They always change. So make sure you go and do that. And then at the end of the podcast, I would just want to share something else with you, a new opportunity. Shawn, I am so excited. We have conversations on Friday mornings, regularly-ish. And I'm so excited to, have a conversation where we see each other and we get to share this with the Conscious Investor.
Yeah, always a delight, Julie. It's always a pleasure speaking with you. It's always uplifting. I know it's usually on Fridays, which is kind of a Friday fun day, still work, but we just carve out a little extra time. So I'm excited to have a conversation with you and the audience.
It's going to be awesome. Let's just start. Can we start at the beginning? And let's hear the story. I mean, you have a really cool story. I think what I find it interesting, Shawn, is that, and I don't know, so this is also a question, is that when someone says, I was a high school dropout, there's like a, like you did the thing you're not supposed to do. And so I'm curious about the trajectory and how you overcame that identity. Like, I would think, and I will say it as an I statement, that I would wear that as maybe a chip on my shoulder, like something I'm always trying to overcome and prove that even though I dropped out of high school, like I've got the stuff it takes and I am successful. And just what that looked like. So what did it feel like? What did it look like? And how did it transition, the concept of being a high school dropout?
Wow, that's a big question.
Yeah.
So I don't think I've been asked in that form before, but good for you. So let's try to answer this in a first. I'm a high school dropout, and honestly, I hid that for years just because of my own insecurities and trying to prove who I was, and felt like that was something that was a barrier of respect or prestige or success, all those things that the way the world judges us. But for me, it started, back in high school. What really was, it wasn't because I just, said, I'm just going to drop out. It was because I was a wild one and had a very rebellious nature, always in trouble of some sort. But I was a leader in my own right, just in getting in trouble, in driving too fast, and just I love to have fun. So the fun is what got me in trouble. And then I woke up my senior year and I'm like, I'm going to get my act together. I'm going to do this. And I had skipped my first 3 weeks of my senior year. So obviously, even at my age, I can look back and understand that that's probably not a good thing to do, because when I did decide to get back to it and give it a go and see if I could turn things around, I had no idea where any of my classes were. That was like the beginning of the end. So I knew, hey, you know what, that's it. And I had my parents behind me saying, hey, you're either going in the military or you're going to go work full time, one of the two. And my mom was like, if you go in the military, you're going to die. So I'm like, okay. So I went to work, and that was kind of the start of it. But, I always say, Julie, there's this challenge in the school system where, everybody's not wired the same. And so for some of those who, like me, may have a rebellious side, doesn't mean that you're not intelligent, doesn't mean that you don't have amazing potential or that you have success waiting for you. It just means that the school system doesn't really conform to those types. And that was me. So fast forward a little bit. Yeah, you kind of hit the spot on the head. The transition was hard. It was essentially work, get to work. You just have to work. The one thing I had in my corner was that, my dad was a hustler. He was a hard worker. I watched him pull himself out of poverty. We grew up really poor, and I grew up poor, but then my wife and I started out really poor as well. But my dad pulled himself out of poverty, and he didn't believe in handing over a silver spoon or something of that nature. So, what we had to fend for ourselves. And although there may be a little bit of, in that moment, a little bit of frustration over that, like, hey, mom and dad, how come you can't help? It's the greatest blessing they ever gave me at this point. So really, it just came a point where I had to fight through defining who I was and decide, do I want to be labeled the dropout and have the stigma of what often people, society, or culture think of that? Or do I want to fight and try to, win my way through this world? And that's what I did. I just began to fight.
Wow. Okay. I'm so grateful because all of that is so interesting, and he gave you know me well enough to know. Oh, Jude's probably going to have a question here. But it's so true, because it's not just high school dropout. In Conscious Investor, I know that we put labels on ourselves. It could be I was the goody good. It could be the complete opposite. I was the valedictorian of the class. Everyone put so much pressure on me, and I put pressure on myself. Or I was the jock, when we are in the formidable years of our life, labels carry a lot of weight. And so I'm curious,
Yes.
because how your process isn't just it's not necessarily unique to being a high school dropout. So I'm curious what that process in shifting your personal awareness and identity, what did that look like? And you and Corey have been married for at least 30 years, I believe. So
29.
20.
And a
Okay,
half.
you're coming
And
up
three
on
quarters.
it.
Three quarters.
So awesome. So maybe, I don't know if you were married also going through this identity shift, but can you give us some insight as to what that looked like when you chose like making it?
Yeah, for sure. So, I'm blessed with a deep stubbornness. And that stubbornness means I hate pain and I hate losing. Not in a way of competition with somebody else, just in how I feel about how my own life's going. So even as a young man, when the schools were telling me, you take the different placement tests and everything, they basically said, you're going to be a farmer. Your best bet is to be a farmer. And I'm like, what does that mean? Do they even know that I just went down and circled all the answers and didn't breed one? So somehow I'm going to be a farmer, but who cares? It was funny because they had all these, predetermined ideas of what Shawn would be. And I think we see that on a regular basis, that these labels that we put on to people who may not appear to be following the norm. And so, for me, luckily that stubbornness that I have, I worked 3 jobs. So I was willing to put in the work. I was always a hard worker, and I've always been blessed with being able to see opportunity. So it's funny. I always tell the story. Corey and I bought our first house. Actually, I bought my first house at 19, and so I bought this house, and it was a very, very humble beginnings. I mean, it was a tiny house for sure, but it was my house, and it was the first one, and so I was super excited about it. And, all my money went to paying the rent of, I think it was like $320, a whole $320 a month, for the mortgage, actually. And during that time, you settle in, you get a win, but then everything gets stale, and you sort of get this comfort level, you stabilize, and then you start, that same feeling comes back. And that feeling of, well, how come I'm not progressing? I need to take on more. How do I get this and that and achieve and win? And every time you take another step, you stabilize again and it settles down. So I've been blessed to be able to see opportunities around me. And I had one gentleman, and he's still a great friend of mine today. He's probably about 15 years older than me, but he was selling cars. Now he has a huge holding in real estate. It's funny because, if he can make $1 anywhere, that's what he does. And so he was a great example of being a hustler. And so I asked him, I said, hey, can I sell cars? Because I loved cars. I'm a car guy. Can I sell cars too? And he said, well, yeah, let's do this. And we found a way to get through that. And he was buying them at the auction. And so my dad lent me $3,000, gave me a credit line of $3,000 to start. And I bought a car, did well, paid my dad back, kept a few $100s in my pocket, and turned it over. But it was what it was really about is that I saw another opportunity. I did that for years. In 1 year, in my early 20s, the highest point, I sold like $10,000 in profit in cars on a side hustle. For me, that was huge. So really, it was getting past the stigma of the dropout was really about finding wins, trying to prove myself, that led to success later in life. So that's kind of the path. It really is just about the fight.
I had a conversation earlier in Conscious Investor. You've heard Mark England on the podcast before, and he focuses on words. And so it's interesting because you're focusing on the evidence, right? And so I may have been a high school dropout, but I'm going to shift the evidence and stack everything in the direction I want to go. And that doesn't have to define me forever.
Right. And, more so than that, I operated out of fear. I have for a long time. In fact, the book we're finishing up, Fear to Fortune. Mm-hmm. In that book, it gives the same premise of the fear. It's been, so I believe as a person of faith that we should not operate in fear. And it's contradicting to, our faith in God, but it doesn't mean it just disappears. It's still there. It's still a real thing in our lives. And for me, it was a fear of not being able to take care of my family. So when my wife and I first got married, we were young. She was 19 and I was 22, I believe, 21, 22. And then immediately we had my first daughter. So now we not only have, I have my wife and my daughter to take care of. And, we didn't have any extra money. We were going into debt just to buy groceries and diapers. And oh my gosh, the diapers and formula together were just overwhelming. It was ridiculous, for someone who's starting out. And that's without the inflation of today.
Right.
So the fear is what always was behind me, pushing me along to chase, to find more, to hustle a buck, to do more. I think so many people get caught in the trap where they don't feel like they're able to do something, but it's not because they don't have the talent. It's not because they don't have, the resources, it's often because the fear mindset holds them back from ever taking a step forward.
Mm.
That's really the biggest challenge that was for me. But I was taking step forwards, and slowly it led to the blessings that I have today and some of the successes that I get to enjoy.
That's so insightful. And, I mean, you and I love diving into, our Bibles and just knowing, like, I always just, fear was my Achilles heel also. And that just really was always a gray cloud in my life. I could be enjoying something and then something weird would happen and it was just like cloud of fear. Oh, did I say that the wrong way? Did I hurt their feelings? And then it'd be fear of, I just, socially doomed myself, or so
For
many
sure.
other ways. But in the Bible, God is so kind. And remember, conscious investor, if you haven't read your Bible, I always say, and you've heard me say this before, everyone's belief is open to them, but a lot of times God gets gossiped about and spoken about, and maybe you haven't actually gotten to know God on your own. So in my pursuit of saying, like, who are you, God? How do I get to know you and who you say you are, not who other people say you are? Cover to cover, I always see, do not worry, do not be afraid, be strong and courageous. In some way, shape, or form, those words. And they are so liberating. And you're right. So many people are just trapped in the fear of whatever the fear is. Or there's so many ways we could fill in the blank and we could just pause. And I know that conscious investor, your mind would probably be flooded with a lot of ideas of fear. So how did you navigate? I had a way I ended up navigating the fear, and I'll just share that briefly. And that was, God put me in a lot of very uncomfortable positions where I had to depend on Him in every way, shape, and form. And so I developed that relationship. And then it was like, I guess I don't need to be afraid because, wow, you carried me through that situation that I thought was horrific. And it built my body of evidence and my confidence to say, whatever I see, I don't have to be afraid of this because God's bigger than all of that. So I'm curious what happened in your life that helped you really, move beyond and break free from the fear.
Yeah, obviously, leaning on your faith is super crucial. It has to be a stepping stone or foundation within your life. But I think you really just have to make the decision that you're going to have fight and that you're willing to put in the work. Because if a guy like me can do it, anybody can do it, Julie. It's really true. What I have is that I have grit and I was willing to push forward. Now, looking back, I would do some things differently. Obviously, I think most of us would, looking back, I gave away so much in my family, in watching my children grow the first decade. I lost all of that because I was so fear driven, and all I did was fight through, work and the next thing and trying to make something to work, whatever it was in different areas, whatever, just to make money. It was all about money. And it's proven me well for now, but I think I've told you before, I was in my mid to late 30s and didn't even realize I had reached financial success that I didn't even know. I didn't even know because I had tunnel vision and I was so focused on these things and just keep fighting, don't go broke, don't go broke, don't go broke. And I was gaining along the way. When I look back now, I see so many things that I was blessed with along the way. But I think it's so important, and I wish I'd have done this. If I were sharing advice for anybody, I would say this is so important right here. Don't forget to take time to look backwards, because in the backwards is where you're truly going to see where God formed you into something that you really wanted to become that you hadn't seen yet. And so what that does is that gives you tremendous confidence at that point. So to see that, hey, look, I can do this, what's in front of me now. this big picture thing, this next big 10x or whatever you want to call, however you want to package it. There's a lot out there, and now you want to package the next big thing, whatever that is. You can look backwards. And you and I were talking about reflection not too long ago.
Yeah.
I think in our last conversation, and I think that really is the key component, because people think that, I just don't get wins like that. And I could never do that because I don't have the talent, the resources, whatever it may be. And if you look back on some things that you either prayed for before, or you really hoped for, or you wish you could attain someday, and you look deep enough, I promise you, odds are you're going to find something back there where it was a win, and you've just gotten comfortable with that new level, and it's become distant and foggy to you. So, but what it is it's proof. It's the proof of your capability. So I think it's so important to look back to remind ourselves of that proof.
Wow, that's so helpful. And it's so easy to get stuck in the hustle and I want to go right now. The trendy thing is, and I talk about this, I'm throwing myself under the bus too, conscious investor, but we talk about, growing into that next best version of ourselves. And it can be such a futuristic outcome that we're looking for, that we don't take that time to reflect and to see the fruit of our reward, like of our labor and our hard work and the diligence, the discipline, and everything. That's so important. So I'm curious, we've gone from identity shifting into overcoming fear, and then realizing, oh my gosh, I'm financially free. I'm financially successful. What does that look like? Because the media and the world in general wants to say that, because I think you see it too. I think it's hard to not see it, but people who are financially successful are portrayed as greedy and villainous and out for their own good and selfish and things like that. I've never had that. I very rarely, that is the exception, probably the 1%, not the rule that I have discovered. And so I'm curious, what does that look like? Because a lot of people aspire to grow and to cultivate that financial independence, and they achieve it and they're empty, and they're now tired of, literally, I remember talking to a friend of mine, and he's like, yeah, I golf all the time. I take vacations with my family, and he was happy, but he knew he was missing. Now he's doing something that is full of contribution, and it's so cool. I kind of gave a friendly challenge the first time I met him. And so what does that look like? And what are some of the responsibilities of having that type of opportunity in life?
Yeah, so that's a great question. What I thought the money was going to bring, what I thought the success would bring, is nowhere near where I'm at today. In fact, what we try to do, and I've seen this in friends and others as well, but I've discovered it deeply in my own life, is essentially we're trying to fill in my life, a godlike void with a thing, a materialistic thing, or with success or money or that car or that house or all these things. And, I've chalked off those things one at a time, and thinking that's going to be the one, if I just do this, if I have the home, if I have the car collection, if I have this, that, whatever, if my business does X, whatever it is. And Julie, I can tell you, every time it leaves me empty. It leaves me empty. So there's a little endorphin rush. I won't deny that. So there's nothing wrong with winning. There's nothing wrong with success. I think every Christian, everybody should chase success. It's a form of developing and creating that I think we are made to do. Yeah. So it's so important. But what I know to be true today is the success that you're chasing is probably not going to be the picture that you have when you get there. It's going to be different. It's going to look different. And I will tell you, my wife and I have had some marriage struggles. And the struggles were because I was gone. I was gone chasing this, building this, doing this. Now she's been a saint in the fact that she stayed with me all the times while I was gone. I mean, I'm just it's tough when you're building a business in multiple businesses, and I have my hands in multiple things, so it really pulls and tugs on you in different ways, and you don't make all the events with the family and the things that you value less now, but at some point you're going to realize, and that's where I'm at right now, Julie. Is my kids are, they're three are married, all just freshly married in the last couple of years. I have one left, four daughters, one left who's at home, 17. And I'm like, oh my gosh, where has the time gone?
Mm-hmm.
And now I see things so much differently. I like to say, I don't give a rip about the house. I mean, I do like my cars, but no, I'm just being sarcastic. I mean, I like collecting them, and I like hey, money can be fun.
Yep.
Go get it. Go get some, because, some of the things and enjoyments and pleasures you can buy, yeah, they're fun. Why not? Why not? But they're not going to fill the void. They're not going to fill the void. And that's where I'm at today. So today, where I'm at, you mentioned the podcast. Thank you very much. It's very new, very raw, very fresh. So that's more of a legacy move for us. And it's like, hey, you know what? Why can't we just have conversations that help people? And they're based on conversations we've always had before within people within our church, through mentorships and different ways that we give back. Now we've just brought it to a level to where maybe we can give back on a bigger platform. And really that's where the excitement comes. And it's a whole new fulfillment. Just having conversations with you, Julie, sometimes when we connect on Friday and we just, kind of drill into some deep thought stuff, that's fun for me. I love that stuff. And you can't put a price tag on it. So I just want people to understand, for those who may be chasing it like I was, look, there's nothing wrong with that, but just know that you may be a little disappointed when you end up where you think is the end of the rainbow, because you may have left too many things behind along the way.
I remember my dad. I'm the baby. I am the bottom of the four. I think we've talked about this, but I remember my dad, expressing that in my early adulthood and such, and that it was a tender spot in his heart because he was working, ferociously to provide for our, his family. And so he missed out on a lot of things. And he looked back with that regret that has tempered me. His willingness to be transparent about that has tempered me to some extent, because it's allowed me to sometimes have to say, are you hustling? Are you hustling? Are you going too hard? Are you bringing on too much? And a year ago I brought on way too much, and I had a really terrible summer because I didn't go and play with my kids. I didn't do the things that we normally do. And it just felt so horrible going into the next school year. And then this year I've made it a concerted, I'm like, nope, nothing is going to get in the way of these important, precious times. But if I hadn't had my dad tell me that, 20 years ago, and then, it's reminded with friends like you and Conscious Investor, I know you too are a high performer. You're highly motivated. You're ambitious. That's why one of the reasons you love this show. And so it's good for you and I to have role models like Shawn to say, okay, but what does this look like? And we can't have it all. We don't have to have it all right this second. And so we can have that financial positioning that we want, but we don't have to have it right this second at the expense of important relationships in our life.
Yeah, that's really good. That's so good. And it's true. I think if your investor, the conscious investor, could realize that, hey, where's that ceiling of success? Where's my marker point? Or is it an open-ended journey? Because that's really where the trap is, I believe. Now, Julie, I'll tell you this. I've been in such hustle mode and chase mode for so many years. I'm trying to figure out, how do I ratchet back? And every
Right.
time I try to a little bit, and the wife and I will have conversations. Every time I try to, I'm like, I'm not quite sure how, because I'm like, okay, I'm not going to work Mondays anymore. I quit working Mondays. Well, that lasted about 3 weeks, and then I'd kind of trickle in, and I'm there on Monday, and everybody's like, "What are you doing here?" I'm like, I just, I just had a few things to do, and then it was okay. I'm not going to work Fridays, or I'm going to quit working weekends, and it just. So then I shifted what I work. I've worked Saturdays like, oh my gosh, for the last 30 years, at least the morning, half a day, and I love it because it's quiet time.
Right.
So I shifted that, and I said, okay, I won't work weekends anymore, and so I found myself working on other projects, kind of a different work related in at home. So here's the thing. You get so much momentum in life as you drill in with tunnel vision on certain things. And if you don't keep trickling in the important things along the way, it starts getting really hard to figure out how. It's like a stranger to you.
Yeah.
The events that most people are, no, I shouldn't say most people, but that a lot of people are taking advantage of now, that we absolutely should be kind of pulling into our normal schedule with family, with your spouse, and loving them, because that really is where the foundation of success comes from, is support from your loved ones, and having solid relationships, and all those things that just encourage you and excite you and gives you vigor around life. If I'd have had that along the way too, man, I can't even imagine what I might have accomplished. But when I did this, it was out of fear, and I was lonely a lot of times. It's not the way to do it. There's a much better way. My route is not the way. It's the way of, remember what your target is, and set a goal for what's enough for you.
Yes.
When is it enough? And I think that's a strong, powerful point, to where a conclusion, instead of you're just going to be trapped in this race forever.
Oh, that's so critical, that like you said, most people don't know what enough is. You have
Yeah, for
some
sure.
really great practices that you've shared with me that I intend. Now you're going to hold me accountable, and you too, conscious investor. I'm open to that. But with you take your daughters out, you have a day of the week that you rotate through your daughters to get together with them and have one-on-one time. You have time with your wife. Like, at what point did those things enter the spectrum, into your space, as these are non-negotiables? As hard as it is to stick to the schedule, this isn't negotiable.
Yeah, you're right. It's a hard schedule. Most people who look at my calendar are like, "What in the world, man?"
Right.
So, but I'm an advocate for organization, because I think the more organized you are, and the more you lock into your calendar, the more
Yeah.
time that frees itself, because you're intentional about where you're spending time.
Yes.
So, for me, to answer your question, yes, I'm very intentional about the time that I spend with my daughters. I saw them growing up. I was less with my wife. I'll share that before everybody throws stones here. But I was less with my wife. My daughters, I started seeing them change, get out of high school, and make a shift. And I'm like, oh my gosh, because like I mentioned, I missed a lot of times. We had dinner every night at the table. Whenever I was here, I would just duck off after dinner and, whatever. So we did make a point to be close, and we were close. But I realized that time is shrinking so quick. So I designed, into my calendar, date nights with my daughters. Now, having 4 daughters, that makes for a full schedule. So every Tuesday, I allocated every Tuesday to my daughters, and they are on the same date every month. I need consistency to operate right in my life. So, the first, second, third, fourth week of every month, sometimes when it's an extra Tuesday, it's like, yeah, it's a free day. Not that I don't want to spend it with them, but it just, the schedule is monotonous. So I started that probably about 7 years ago, and it's a hard, fast rule. Now they know, because now they're married and some things have changed, but they're still going on dates with dad. So I love that. However, they know that, look, dad's allocated this no matter what, and you can choose to or you cannot. It's up to you, but that's my time for you. You choose whether you want it. And it's allowed us to be intentional about the time that we spend and keep that relationship close. I work with some of my daughters, and one of my daughters is my director of operations. I mean, she's smart as a whip, and she's been with me 10 years, worked her way into that position. I don't give out positions very easily. She worked her way into that position and earned it, by the way. And, so everybody thinks, well, you spend a lot of time with your daughters. Well, when you're in the workplace, you know what? Just because you're in the same building, there is no quality time together. There's no, relationship building. It's work. Everybody's doing something. So these times are so important. And I recommend it to everybody because it is a fantastic way to keep a voice in your children's life because you've stayed close enough to them and not let enough distance in hopefully the world and their friends, be a voice that they respect in their life. So it's been great for me. I did pull my wife into that too. So we have every Thursday evening is our night. Sometimes it may just look like popcorn in a movie. Sometimes it's, tonight we have dinner plans with friends, but it always varies. But now it's specifically allocated. Why do I do those things? Because I sacrificed the wrong way earlier in my life. And now I realize how uber important those things are. That's the true success in life. The money is secondary. It's great to have both, but you don't want to end up with money and no family and no relationships because what's it going to do for you?
Yes. Oh, so good, Shawn. I value, you're such a great influence in my life, and I'm so grateful. You have perspective that is so important for ambitious people such as myself and conscious investor. I think this might resonate with you too. Like, invite influences like Shawn into your life. And it's cool because God will put people into your life. I mean, it was so great, meeting you. And it was like, wow, I had no idea. I always love to invite influences in my life that are positive and, keep my faith intact while like giving me that perspective, because there aren't always that many ambitious people out there who will give you some real truth into your life. And so I can't thank you enough. This has been a great conversation, Shawn. And Conscious Investor, I know that you have gained so much. If let's give them a synopsis or just like one more reminder about the podcast that you and your amazing wife.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And by the way, Julie, hey, iron sharpens iron. You always hear me say that. Hopefully you remember me saying that because that goes both directions. And, just because I may have reached success or you may have reached success in one way, it doesn't mean that we don't interact with people of all different levels to make sure that we're sharpening each other. Yes. That's really what the goal is. So the podcast, it's a fun event. We're having fun with it and trying to figure out where we're going and all those things. But basically, it's just raw, unedited conversations, kind of like this, based on our experiences in health, wealth, happiness. You'll hear marriage. You'll hear conversations about, some of our children and just some of the craziness of things. One of the videos that seems to be going well right now is, why do people annoy you? Me in particular. So obviously, it struck a nerve. And it sounds like it wasn't alone, but it's just real conversations like that. And that we're hoping that we can maybe either leave something behind for our grandkids, great grandkids, whatever, but maybe even impacts and make some friends along the way, just in the audience.
I have full confidence that you already are. And I haven't, watched all of them, but I did I watched a few of them and I was perusing through some of the different topics. And I am like, I love the menagerie of topics that are being covered. And some of them are a little more sensitive for some people to engage with. And so I love bringing those type of conversations to the surface because people need ways of communicating about things that they might not be comfortable talking about. And so it's so great. So I love these conversations. Conscious Investor, I want to make sure like head on over, check over to YouTube, check out and subscribe, show some love to Conversations Left Behind with Shawn and his wife, Corey. I think that you're going to enjoy those conversations. And then I told you at the beginning, I wanted to just remind you of this great opportunity. You can download Beyond Financial Freedom, a Conscious Investor's Guide to Personal Freedom. And so I want to invite you, if you haven't already downloaded that, this is really talking about that holistic way of investing so that yes, we can have the financial freedom that we want in our life, but not at the expense of the most important parts of our life, right? And so you want to actually text this number. You're going to text the word freedom, and then you'll be able to download to whatever device you want Beyond Financial Freedom. So you're going to text the number 208 944 1836. And you just send the word freedom. And spoiler or invitation, you can also text that number and you can reach me personally. And I do personally respond. So that comes directly, if you're watching on YouTube, like comes directly to my little computer in my pocket. And I can, respond back with you. So feel free to reach out. Freedom. And that number once again is 208 944 1836. Until next time, Conscious Investor, cheers to your health, your mindset, and your wealth.